Thank you for watching this video. So basically what it is I'm going to give you a quick overview of the tool as it is right now. Some important things to look for is sort of the saves folder will bring up where your content is stored. So when you want to share levels, they're going to be in the saves folder. I'm going to go back to the editor for now. So this is the default scene that you're loaded with. It's got by default the terrain editor, so you can raise and lower the ground. So if you want to lower it, you could do so. It starts already at the flattest point, so you can only build up from this point. There's different masks you can use to build up with. So for example, if I wanted to, I could raise it really quickly, like that. There's a way to set the height, which will actually paint it to that value and only that value. So you can use that to make cliffs and interesting things. You can, of course, destroy and recreate the terrain. And then you'll notice that when I destroy it, there's different types of grass. So what I can do is I'll just put that, whoops, I made it way too quickly. More gentle. There we go. Let's say we want to make that rocks. So I could smooth it a bit if I want to. I could go over here to the painting, add another type of paint. If you have suggestions for other terrain types, let me know. I will be adding them as we go. But let's go ahead and paint this to be more rocky. With 100% rock at the top. There we go. So that's terrain. There's not much more to it. It's pretty intuitive. Then there's the object list. So objects mode is when you can start clicking on objects. These have some default scripts on them that are pretty useless, so I'm just going to delete them. This is the player capsule. You'll notice that you can only place one of them. It's just the player position. Don't worry about any scripts or tags or anything like that, or scale. There's nothing that you can change here that actually affects the player. It's just where the player is going to be spawned. There's a lot of different object types, so I won't try to explain them too much, just to give you a brief overview. There's also an object list view that we'll go into a bit later. And there's a whole bunch of things to do with scripting. So triggers, all they are is they're transparent zones that when you touch them, it fires off what's called a trigger event in Unity. In the engine, it doesn't really trigger anything until you write code to do so. So they're really just good for placing invisible objects and regions, scaling them up to decide how big you want the collider to be. You can quickly delete objects and place them. There's only one player, so you can find it and it'll instantly take the camera to it or look at it. A water plane is the easiest way to add a body of water. And what it is it's a collection of objects, so the surface and the base. So the surface has a waviness to it that moves, and then when you're inside of it, the base makes sure that your view outside the water is also wavy. So I'll lift that up a bit and go inside the water. And there you go. That's what it looks like inside the pool. The player's too close. There we go. So it looks like you're underwater. Pretty simple. Waypoints are just like triggers, except they're more meant for determining path points. They're a different color, so it's easy to tell that they're a waypoint. 3D points are like triggers as well, but they're very tiny. They're good for loading other objects in at runtime, which I'll show later. And then there's the flat PNG, which is any flat image you want to load. It loads them from code. We'll take a look at that too. Built-in objects, you got your standard cube, standard sphere, standard quad, which is a face that you can only see from one direction. So if I rotate this round, it disappears. Billboards are good to use quads. Cylinder, again, another basic object built in. Capsules, just like the player capsule. And you can color them. So you can choose a different color for it if you want to, and you can build complex objects out of these shapes. Let's say that you wanted to build something a bit more interesting, so I'll place a plane, which is a flat terrain that no matter how you size it, it's not going to get thicker. And just like the quad, you can't see the bottom. Let's say I have some objects that I'm going to place together like this. The object list view lets you do something simple. You can click and drag, so the cylinder should be underneath the plane. The capsule should be underneath the cylinder. And now you can move them all at once. And if you move the cylinder, it moves the capsule and so on. You can unparent them. That's the point of the object list, is to basically make it easy to find, select, and parent objects. Parenting is just stored while you're editing. It's not stored during save and load. Here's some basic shapes, a mixing barrel. Now notice how this one has physics. So it will move if you touch it. Different shapes built in. The star is just a 3D model of a star. Cameras, different types of cameras. We're not going to go into those today, but you can do some interesting things with them. There's the mirror, which I will show actually, because it's pretty simple. You place it in the scene, and it reflects what the camera sees. It's not really a mirror, it's just more like a camera that you can see in world. And that camera graphic there is just so you know which way is front. There's VR cameras if you're using VR. Second, third, fourth display cameras if you have different monitors, multi-monitors. Some 3D UI, so text centered, right, left centered, sprite, button. Just some helpful prefabs. Directional light is basically like the sun. Doesn't matter where you place it. What matters is the angle of it. See that? You can rotate it to change the universal lighting. Point lights are different. They're actually like a light in a space, and you can scale them for brightness. Spotlights are like the point lights, except instead of going in every direction, they only go in one direction. So you can see that as I rotate it, it generates that kind of distortion. All right, so that's lights. Drawing commands, we'll get into those a bit later. The lines and loop lines are edited via code. Constant particles are just particles that spray all the time, and you can scale them. So you can make a neat fog effect if you have enough of them. One-shot particles are like normal particles, but after they've completed their run, they will not fire any more particles. They just stop. They're good for special effects. Trail renderers are pretty cool because, as you can see, it creates a trail as you move it. And once that trail is complete, it will just smoothly go back to the source. Then you have your basic objects, so full scenes from previous projects. So this is a bit of Hamilton area, Augusta and James Street area. There's one called the Pain Clinic, which is another project we're working on. You also have some access to some basic anatomy and characters. So there's Pepper Robot, Skeleton, Nervous System, Urban Objects, Plant, Fountain. There's a glitch with the fountain currently where the water can be seen through everything. It's just a shader glitch. I'm going to work on that. This tool is very much in development, but the levels you make should be cross-compatible. Some different types of objects you can place. Nature objects, including some trees. Barriers, you can make an invisible wall if you like. That doesn't do anything special except block you. Unlike the trigger, you can't pass through it. There's a brick wall in there, more textures to come in the future. 3D scans is just some art that was made in tilt brush or photogrammetry methods of importing them into 3D. Some pretty cool stuff there. The pain clinic is basically doctors' medical objects that we're working with. CKA is just some works by the local team with Harold, who Dr. Smith and I have worked with a few times on research projects. Caribou is technically part of that as well. Snapped, these are objects that snap to the surface of something, so you can see that they pass right through objects, but they sit flat on the ground. You can snap to objects, so this will wrap around an object. And snap to grid, so these will fit to a grid. Physical objects are, again, anything that's controlled by physics. So if you clone a lot of these and then you run it, it's going to make them fly all over the place, and I'll demonstrate that in a bit with this pile here. I might as well make a few of these. Physics is always fun. With variations is a bit of an example of what the editor can do. So you can have a version of the object with different amounts of barrels. So if I rotate that, you can see there's different settings for it. Streamed and culled is more for objects that you're going to have lots of in a scene, like blades of grass. They're designed so that you can quickly basically have batches of them all at once. I also find it interesting that they had that circle around it, but that's gone now. Okay, so a bit more about these buttons. So this is the ability to move an object based on where another object is. So if you use this one, normally, because I've used physical, that one probably won't do it. But normally that finger one lets you place an object on top of something. Regular movement, rotation, scaling. You'll notice that as you change the mode, it'll show you the numbers here for what you're doing. And then you can make it global or local when you do movements. So in most cases, that's not going to make a difference, but you'll see with this object, because it's rotated slightly, making it global makes it always rotate straight forward. And then, yeah, so there's a few more things. You can give them ID numbers for easy finding via scripts. You can give them tags. The tag information is in the script editor, which we'll cover a bit later in the next video. There's the ability to test your scripts in the editor. Most script functions will let you do it. So that's kind of the basic of this tool. You can clone, delete, find the object in the scene. So I could click on here, click an object, click find. Oh, sorry, find finds that type. So when I click on this, it'll find that type in the scene. Whereas if I click on another object and then click the eye, then it looks at it. And these barrels can have two different settings, closed top, open top, and different colors as well. Sleep on start just means that they'll float in the position they're in, and then the physics activates when you touch them. I recommend that just for performance reasons. Test all scripts runs all scripts. You can force either a uniform or a non-uniform scale, so by default it's forcing uniform. Note that if you change the scale, you need to actually choose out of the scale mode first and then go back into scale. So if you did want to make something like a really wide barrel, you could do so. There's also the undo and redo buttons. Not everything can be undone and redone, especially when it comes to scripting, but general object placement you can undo, redo. Okay, that's the Objects tab, the Save and Load tab. So in order to play a level, you'll probably want to create a screenshot. So render that first. Then you're going to want to save it. It's alphabetical, so you can see the very top is 0. I'm going to just make one 0, 0. You need to save it before you can play. Then you can hit play. And there go all the trucks. WASD to move. arrow keys or a mouse to look around, right click to zoom in, left click doesn't do anything. F lets you fly. Shift lets you move or fly faster. And you could just mess with the physics in fly mode. You're infinitely strong. You can see those were asleep until I touched them. And you can turn fly mode off. And if you hold, yeah, right click lets you zoom in like that. Back to editor lets you go back to the editor. This up here lets you choose different camera presets. I've gotten pretty far off of what I was looking for. There we go. And yeah, that's pretty much it in terms of the buttons here. There's a little tutorial on some of the camera controls. If you have a touchscreen computer, you could try using these. I haven't tried them. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So loading levels, let's take a look at some levels that are made. Just to show you some of the things you can do, I'm going to go ahead and pull an interesting one up here. So the Mac Grid one is kind of a summary of the things Dr. Smith has had us work on in the past, including some space simulations, some virtual Hamilton simulations. This is the Augusta Street up close. There's Dr. Smith and Hitchbot, the hitchhiking robot that went across Canada and unfortunately died in the States, but not before visiting Germany and the Netherlands in between. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the general intro to the tool. There's a lot more settings to mess with here, so just go ahead and try things out, play levels. If you make a change to a level, you will have to save it before you play again. You could completely change the skybox as well. So, for example, this level is an alien invasion, just from the internet. It's called Dark Skies. And if I fly off the edge of the level here, you'll see that even below it's been replaced with this city view instead of the sky it was before. So yeah, feel free to try some things out before moving on to the next video where I teach you a bit about procedural art making with this tool and some of the more advanced features in it. Thanks for watching.